Welcome to A Century of Service, Stories of Alberta's Military History, sponsored by the South Alberta Light Horse Regimental Association. My name is Lieutenant Colonel Retired Robert McKenzie, and with me today is Chief Warrant Officer Retired Bill Prouse. Welcome, Bill, and we're going to be discussing Bill's 37 years of military service. Now, just starting, Bill, you enlisted in Vancouver in 1947. Can you start there?
I suppose, yep. I was a member of the militia regiment, the British Columbia, the BCRs, British Columbia Regiment, for a couple of years prior to my decision to join the regular force. I got because of the returning guys from WW2, and they were my trainers, of course. And I got really interested in military and figured, well, I'm going to see if I can get into the regular force, and then that's where she started.
Yeah. Okay, and then you joined the Lord Strathcona Horse.
As soon as I enlisted, I was moved from Vancouver into Calgary to the Strathconas, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Where did you take your basic training? In Calgary?
In Calgary, yes. Yeah.
That would have been in the old Miwata barracks, or were you?
Well, no. Sarcee barracks. Not Sarcee.
Right.
Give me a Curry barracks.
Curry,
yeah.
The old Curry barracks, of course, yes. And we served there until, that's where I became a tank driver. Hey, I finally reached my goal. I was a tank driver. Then the base warden needed some tank drivers down there, so off I went to base warden in early 1948. Yeah. And from there we spent quite a few years, and then in the record there, as we've written it, a point-by-point thing. We stayed in the base warden for a few years. In that period of time, became a mechanic. Went to Winnipeg, became further trained in mechanical things, became a tank mechanic, met and married my wife, and then eventually got back to Calgary in 1956. I think we got back to Calgary after all them years in base warden.
Okay, why did you change from a tank driver to a tank mechanic?
Well, that was just part of the progression, I suppose. The business of leaving the mechanical trade, that became, I think, a career plan on my part. I could see being a mechanic forever and ever. Well, it wasn't my choice. Well, it was my choice to a point. They said, okay, all mechanics are going to become REME. They're going to become
Royal Electrical
Mechanical Engineers. I said, do I really want to be a mechanic forever? So I had a choice of working up to the tank crewman trades, and I took that choice. I then became a sergeant, and we went that route rather than stay as a mechanic, yes.
What are the trades within the tank that you had to train?
Oh, yeah. We had to learn to be a tank gunner.
Mm-hmm.
We had to be a radio operator. And of course, I was already a driver, so now I got that. And then in order to become a sergeant with the proper trades pay and all, I had to become an instructor in at least two of those trades.
Mm-hmm.
So it was easy enough to be an instructor in the driving or the tank driver trade, to driver mech track.
Mm-hmm.
Then I had to learn big time to become an instructor in tank gunnery and in communications in order to get the top Group 3 trades pay as a sergeant. Yeah.
What vehicle, the tank, were you operating on then?
Well, we started off, of course, way back as a tank driver as in the Centurion, around the Chieftain. There was one before that. Did I say Chieftain? Sherman, of course.
Yeah.
In any case, there was one before we got into the Sherman tank. We had a Canadian model called a Grizzly, molded hull as opposed to the flat side that the Sherman had. It was a 75 pounder. Of course, the Sherman had the 76 pounder. And so we did a lot of work on training on the 76. And then, of course, as you mentioned, the Centurion came along, and we had to do all the qualifications over again and learn our trades on that vehicle as a crew commander. So that was up to the point of being, we did our Wainwright thing with the regiment in Calgary as a troop sergeant. Then the regiment formed up, and away we went off in 65. The regiment packed up and replaced the Fort Garry Horse in NATO, British Army of the Rhine in Germany.
What was the biggest difference between a Sherman and a Centurion?
Oh, gunnery, of course. The target acquisition and the 20-pounder as opposed to the 76 millimeter, a far better gun. I guess the hands-on, is the controls,
elevation,
we're talking about the instead of the crank we had
electrical.
the controlling this gun and controlling the gunfire was much easier with the Centurion tank as opposed to the 76 millimeter Sherman. Yes.
So you ended up being a tank commander and a troop sergeant at that time, but in between the time that you were working with the Strathconas, you ended up in Egypt.
1960. Oh yes. Well, of course the squadron formed when we did some training, serious training in Sarcee Barracks. At that time, when the regiment had moved out to Sarcee Barracks from Currie, and serious training on the Ferret Scout car in preparation for our year in Egypt. Of course, when we got to Egypt, we didn't have Ferret Scout cars at all. We had the old Jeep, the CGA Jeep, to do our patrols in. The interesting part about the Egyptian trip was, we were peacekeepers, the UN, United Nations peacekeepers, and there was peace to keep. And then today, these days, present day peacekeepers, I don't know why they call them peacekeepers, because there is no peace to keep when they're put into these areas. So why are they calling them peacekeepers? I don't know. They're going into war zones. However, our tour there was quite easy because of it. We were able to interact with the local Bedouin.
During your time in Israel, you said it was a United Nations operation. So what was it like to live in the camp at that time? I mean, it wasn't just Canadians, was it?
Oh, no. You see, the Gaza Strip then was like the Swedes. Swedes were up the north end by Gaza City. Then coming back down towards, we were on the Israeli-Egypt border, would have been another Hindu battalion, and also a Brazilian battalion were on that border between the Gaza Strip and Israel. And again, the Gaza Strip was a very narrow piece of ground. When the mandate was made, when the State of Israel was formed, the Palestinians were moved out. And instead of putting them properly, or weren't accepted properly, in my opinion, in Egypt or Jordan or Syria, they were put in these refugee camps, so the Gaza Strip being one of them. And it was a very narrow strip of ground, and it just fostered hate, and it fostered more, instead of integrating into, no, they didn't integrate, they just stayed in this Gaza Strip. So there was always a battle between Israel and the Palestinians on the Gaza Strip. Our front was easy as compared to that one. Who else was there? Well, further, I mentioned the Yugoslavs further south of us. When we did our sort of 30 miles on the north end of the frontier, the Yugoslavians did the south part all the way down to Gulf of Aqaba, I guess, yes. The, who else was involved there? Again, United Nations. As far as I can remember, that was about it.
Well, you're talking about your base camp, and you said there was the Swedes ran the hospital and that, so it was quite a United Nations in the base camp.
Yeah.
But you did mention something about salt pans.
Well, yeah, again, on that picture, you can see the Mediterranean in the background, and then on the shorefront, you can see these bins in the picture, and what they are is trapping the salt water to save the salt, or to catch the salt after the water evaporates from sitting in the trapped salt trap, whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
And it evaporated, and then they scraped the salt, and
Yeah, they come and pick up salt from after the evaporations. That's where your sea salt comes from, I guess. Yeah.
So how much time did you spend interacting with the civilian population while you're a peacekeeper?
What we did was a 2-week tour sort of thing. We'd be in main camp, and then do maintenance on our vehicles and the patrols around camp and things, and then we'd be out to an outpost, and probably a picture or two would be involved there, a picture of an outpost where we did our patrols from. The outpost would be sort of 15 miles south. Well, no, the first one maybe wouldn't be quite that far. Maybe the first one would be 10 miles south, and then the another one further south, Fort Perkins. We call them, would you believe, Fort Perkins, and the main camp was Fort Worthington, would you believe, because of Armored Corps. Fort Worthington, Fort Perkins, and what was the one in the north? I can't remember the name of it now. In any case, we did our patrols from these outposts, and quite comfortable they were. We had beds and all, and in a wooden building, and we did our patrols from the outposts, and they would do that for 2 weeks, then back into main camp. Next time out, we'd go to the other outpost to do our patrols from the other outpost, then back in, and then the sequence would start all over again. Yeah, it was certainly wasn't pressurized, or it wasn't pressureful by no means, pressurous. It was boring for most of the time, boring. We did have movies come in. We did have hockey games, films, come in.
Now you had a rough experience with your driver over there. He passed away.
That was. We had been together a year. We trained together here in Canada for 6 months, some months before we went over, and then we had 4 or 5 months over there before he went on this NCO course where they did the physical training. Because of his previous ailment, unbeknownst to anybody, he had died doing PT. Close we were. He would look after all the things I needed, and I'd look after all the things he needed. And because we did our patrols together, literally lived together. Yeah. Mind you, the troop officer and I had separate quarters from the troop patrol commanders had separate quarters from the troopers, and at the outpost it was pretty comfortable, reasonable.
But when you were in Egypt, you got around to visiting the various historical sites there, like the pyramids and that?
We did so. We did a weekend. Just like I said, it was 2.5 hours by taxi down to Cairo, over to Cairo, west to Cairo. And we did have a chance to see the pyramids, and an amazing thing I find out in recent years. My daughter went there, 10 years ago or whenever. She said she couldn't get near the pyramids to take a picture. When we were there that early in the sort of, people weren't traveling like they do now. And we were able to get close enough to take a really good picture of all those historical items. Really good pictures.
So what was Jerusalem like during that time while you were there?
Again, very, very quiet. We had a tour, a guided tour, took us to all the places that we wanted to see, the Via Dolorosa, the Church of the, names forgetting the Nativity, the Nativity, the Church of the Nativity. Again, an odd situation there. This church, the Church of the Nativity, is owned by Muslims. So then it becomes a tourist site for Christian people to come to, but the guy at the gate is a Muslim, and you got to get permission.
Muslim.
A Muslim. You got to get permission from the Muslim to go in to see the items inside the Church of the Nativity. A different sort of setup there. What else in Jerusalem that we did see? Various sites. I think there's one picture there in that scene that's got a sort of a downhill look at the a chapel or a church thing, the Garden of Gethsemane, that is, sort of thing, and that's sort of thing we got around on this guided tour where they told us what is here and what is there, what was there. To try to remember it all, we don't really recall. One of the asides to that, the tour guide said to us, "Okay, what was the name of Salt's wife? I'll give you a bottle of whiskey, or a bottle of wine, I should say, if you tell me what Salt's Lot's wife's name was." Well, in the Bible, Lot's wife didn't have a name. But I cheated on that because the guy that was on the tour before told me. He simply tell the tour guy that Lot's wife did not have a name as listed in the Bible. You win. Thank you very much. I got my bottle of wine. That sort of thing went on that guided tour thing. It was quite interesting, actually.
You mentioned earlier an interesting situation when you were providing water to the locals. You have a picture, I think, of a vehicle delivering water drums.
It was a 5-tonner, I think. 5-tonner loaded with 45-gallon drums. And we dropped the drums off at this particular point on the Adret route, which was back from the frontier. And that's where the local Bedouin tribes would gather to pick up their water. In fact, this was a hardpan site. This is where they did their thrashing as well. You'll see a picture in there of the guy doing a camel pulling a
thresher.
Supposedly a plow, but it's a crooked piece of tree or whatever. Oddly enough, through that sand, it was reasonably fertile. We would get a real soaking every night. Soaking of a heavy dew, and the sand would be soaked to a half an inch thick, half an inch deep in dampness. That would grow these maize or some kind of a grain. They did. In any case, they would grow this grain and they would bring it to this hardpan place to thrash because they wouldn't lose a grain. It would stay. This hard clay was a place where they could do the thrashing where they wouldn't lose any grain. And the thrashing was pretty basic as well. Dry it out and throw it in the air, 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 and finally enough the seeds would fall out, and the ladies would pick up all the little seeds after it fell out on the hard pan. And the straw, I guess they kept to feed the camels, whatever. Yeah. And I think the fires were probably fired up from camel dung. The haciendas, you'll see some blankets there, but for the most part it's scrub brush that makes up their shabanas in that picture.
You also mentioned earlier about one of the officers lost his pistol. And which wasn't interesting because back then you lose a weapon and you're in deep trouble, or it was stolen from them.
We believe it did come back mysteriously.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. In any case, it came back mainly because of the threat to cut off the water supply that our commanding officer laid on the local sheikh. You bring that, you get that weapon back. I don't care where it is, you get it back, or else we'll cut the water off. And the gun did come back. We don't know where it came from, or where it went, but we don't care. We got the gun back. And the young officer, I'm sure, paid for some extra duties over that one.
No. But how, yes, the question, how did was any Arab able to get hold of your weapon?
No, not quite. I don't know how that ever happened.
Yeah.
You know.
Okay. But also the medics helped quite a bit with the local population. You had medics in your group.
No. We didn't have that.
No.
We did that. That was our own.
Oh, okay.
We did that on our own. We had I call it a magical salve, bacitration. You think the way they live, that there'll be all kinds of infections and stuff. Oddly enough, there wasn't a whole bunch. The wee babies, the young would get the dirt and infection, the wet ear thing. This bacitration stuff would just clear that infection up in a minute, clean up the infection in the back of the ear. And that young lady that we saw with the burnt back, we were able to save that simply by using the salve stuff. And they didn't seem to have a bunch of infections, no. That wet ear thing was probably the worst on the wee babies, yeah. Yeah, the odd cut foot. And took leaves. We had a week leave in Beirut. It was a nice mountain hotel. Was the UN Leave Center, and a week there. And then I was able to also get a week, the other week, because we had a winter leave and a summer leave. The summer leave I spent traveling back to England, and I met my father there. My father came from Canada to visit his part where he was born and raised in Devon, the West Country. In England, I was able to visit there with him for a few days, and it was quite pleasant getting a week out of the desert to go to England for that summer holiday. So we returned from that and back to the regiment, and I became the regimental gunnery sergeant, the regimental intelligence sergeant, and then where do we go from there? What's on my list? I can't. So then I returned from Egypt in 62. I went back to that summer of 62. I spent at the Vernon Cadet Camp. I was a driving instructor for the cadets out at Vernon Cadet Camp in the summer of 62. That was interesting. That was different. Took my family, had a tent by the lakeside. They had a great holiday. My holiday wasn't quite as good, but not different from our normal military life, for sure, being an instructor at cadet camp. And then now we're talking 62, 63 time.
Then you were with regimental duty in Calgary then, normal training and exercises and up to Wainwright.
Quite right.
Yeah.
Preparing for Europe and all, yes. Yeah. And we did, by that time, I went to Germany, I guess, in 65 as the regimental gunnery sergeant. Then I became the regimental intelligence sergeant. Then they figured I should be a staff sergeant, and they put me into the stores. I became a SQMS. What year was that? 67?
67.
I became SQMS in 67.
And that was about the time of unification.
You'll see my note there.
Yes,
Yeah.
You were promoted staff sergeant and then redesignated warrant officer.
Suddenly I became a warrant officer instead of staff sergeant.
Yeah.
the green world hit
Yeah.
us.
What do you remember about that particular time? Hellier and Unification.
Disappointment, confusion. I know a lot of people. I know a very good friend of ours, Clive Milner,
Yep.
almost lost his job over it. He was a general, major general at the time, when he made some comments that didn't sit right with the government. Yeah. However, we survived it. We did survive it in spite of it all. We wondered if we would survive. We were so bent on our regimental connections, our regimental history, our camaraderie, the esprit de corps. Well, a lot of this stuff went away with it did go away
Unification.
with unification. Yeah, it was disappointing for a lot of us, but we did survive it, I guess. Yeah. Then after being a staff sergeant SQMS, and then I was an aside to being the SQMS. Major Murphy at that time, he became the base commander, you remember. He was a squadron commander, and he said, okay, we're going to go to the Canada Cup trophy. We're going to be the best tank gunners in the world. The Americans never did compete with the Holland, the Dutch, the Germans, who else was from NATO forces involved. In any case, I was the coach of our entry into the Canadian Army Trophy tank gunnery competition. I need not go further on that. I thundered in, okay? We didn't make it. The Dutchman beat us. Well, that's one of my worst nightmares, is getting beat by the Dutch in tank gunnery, however.
So which tank were you using at that time? Still the Chieftain?
No.
That would have been the Centurion tank.
Centurion.
Centurion tank, of course, yeah. And we trained hard for that too, and didn't do as well as we could have or should have. Yeah, and they from there on, I guess we came back to the Petawawa, I guess in '69. '69 we joined the new regiment. Okay, I was 22 years at Strathcona. I proudly wear the jacket and to this day, my first regiment, and we were very proud of it. But then you become, suddenly, you become a member of a different regiment, and a different world. The attitudes of the people were different. You weren't used to the, I dare say, slack.
The Army of the East versus
My
the Army of the
regiment.
West.
The 8th Canadian Hussars at that time, in my mind, I kept saying it to the soldiers, let's do it the Strathcona way. You know, mainly because they didn't seem to get onto the idea of do it now. It was, well, we'll wait. It'll sort itself. Not so. Do it now. So I got in the habit of saying just that. Make it happen. Let's do it the Strathcona way, which was wrong, of course. I'm now in a new regiment. I'm wearing a different cap badge, and I should be faithful to the new unit. Well, it was rather difficult to do. However, they did come around to my way of thinking, and then I became a master warrant officer rather quickly after that. In
72.
'72, I went from warrant officer to master warrant officer in '72.
And what were your jobs as Master Warrant Officer, Bill?
I was B Squadron Sergeant Major. I was Headquarters Sergeant Major in the HCH. Then did a normal thing, normal training. We'd go to the bush and all that sort of stuff, and did field training and then range work. And the regiment was kind of in flux at that time. We didn't know whether we wanted to be Americanized with sort of a cavalry attitude with the reconnaissance and tanks and attack forces all in one squadron sort of thing. Assault troop, tank troop, reconnaissance troop, all sort of in one squadron. Well, it didn't really work out as good as it should have. But we trained that way. We trained that way for a year, over a year, I guess. I went my first job when I went to the HCH was warrant officer of the assault troop. I got a 30-man platoon. So now we're getting out of the tank and getting into the footwork of being an infantry soldier. That was different.
Demolitions and
We had a lot of fun with that one. However, that didn't last long. That assault troop thing folded after a while. It didn't seem
that was the old light armored concept.
You got it, yeah.
Yeah.
I was saying U.S. Cav attitude, but light armor thing for sure. Then from that we went back to Germany. Now, when I went back to Germany, I became the TQ. Now that was not necessarily different because I
That's
had
a technical quartermaster.
yeah, I had been in the stores before, so that wasn't a great change. You know, they didn't have an RQMS. The RCs at that time had one. They had a choice. You can have one or the other. You can't have both. So the armored regiment chose to have a TQ instead of an RQ as the stores guy, and that worked out reasonably well at least for me. And again, we came across a situation where they're just now, not just, 1970, the regiment had moved down from the north where they used to be a good unit, a part of the Canadian Brigade, which was a viable brigade of the British Army in the Rhine, 2 division, I think, it doesn't matter, wasn't being supported by the Canadian government to the standard that was required by the NATO, by British Army in the Rhine. NATO said this is the standard, manned up to scratch, vehicles up to scratch, da-da-da-da. That wasn't being done by Canada. So then, I think it was late 70 that they shuffled off to the south and did some whatever. In any case, I joined them down in Lahr in 1973 or 73 as a TQ.
Now you were RC, you went
The
from
regimental,
HCH
yes.
to RCD.
I was then now with the Groon. I went from Strathcona to HCH to RCD. Yeah.
What does a technical quartermaster do, a TQ?
Stores.
Stores,
You're
the
taking-
technical, the vehicle, and
The tank, the
gunnery.
kit, keeping the tank stowage, the tools,
yeah,
all the equipment needed, the bore sights, the replacement sights, all the things we needed to keep a tank fit to go to war. That was interesting. But again, when I started off saying, when I arrived there, the attitude seemed to be somewhat different again. The guy I replaced wasn't stores trained, didn't seem to care about stores or tanks or anything. We went to be a squadron sergeant major, as he should have been in the first place. We found the stores a little bit upsetting, or no, I shouldn't say upsetting, upset. They didn't know what they had or how they had it. Well, let's start off with some stock taking and find out where we're at, and let's organize these shelves. And we had some major work to do to get these shelves and things organized. And I think the upshot of all that, we had some good soldiers, we had some good workers, bilingual workers. Another little thing we came across there that we had to live with, I was not bilingual by no sense of imagination. So we had to start off the day with these I think we had 3 bilingual guys that choose to speak French. Well, hold it. I'm not in this loop here. If you guys are going to speak French, I'm not in the loop. So we'll start off the day by saying, bonjour, okay? That's it for today. And we got along well. We did so. The soldiers were good storemen. They knew their job, and they worked hard at it. And that part went well. And I think because of that, we've had some pretty good PERs, performance evaluation reports, came out of the 2 years we did doing that, and suddenly I lost that job. I got promoted out of that job and went back to Canada to the Armour School, in Gagetown by this time. I'm now RSM at the Armour School. Well, Instruction has always been one of my forte. I was a pretty good instructor. I could keep the attention of some of the people some of the time. One in particular time, you try to, NBCW, pretty dry subject
It's
sheets.
nuclear, biological, and chemical.
All right, yeah, you got it.
Yeah.
Try to keep people interested, try to keep people awake during that. Tough to happen, however. One time I slapped the ruler alongside the lectern and woke a guy up, and boy, did he ever... He stayed awake after that. I think I did too, but that was, yeah, instructing was one of the greatest things, and I had a chance then now, right at the base of it all, the armor school. Now we can teach some NCO stuff. We can maybe touch on some officer stuff, not much, mind you, but certainly the NCO training and the trades training. We got involved in that, but mainly the NCO, the sergeant courses, the warrant officer courses, and TQ7, the sergeant major courses that came through. I was able to get involved in them to some extent and help with the teaching. So that was an interesting tour as RSM at the school.
Let's go back a bit. You mentioned earlier on you were involved in the FLQ Crisis in October 1970.
Golly, yes. We were called...
This is when you were in Petawawa.
Yep. Our squadron was called out to go into the city of Ottawa to protect ministers and senior bureaucrats as well. Had a soldier attached to him, lived with them 24/7 in their houses and all, to protect them from the insurrection, the apprehended insurrection that Pierre Elliott Trudeau had thought was happening, or did happen to a point. And we were then called into Ottawa to protect these people who may have been endangered because of it. On the side to that story, one of our soldiers was protecting a minister and leading him right into the Parliament building with his armed, with a loaded weapon, protecting his guy, his particular subject. And John Diefenbaker happened to be handy in the hallway. Geez, he got yelling and screaming and hollering and jumping up and down. We got a gun in Parliament buildings. What's happening to our world? You know, as only John could carry on. I'm getting this second hand from my soldier that's telling me that the opposition, the leader of the opposition, really was excited about seeing a loaded weapon in Parliament buildings. But that was the soldier's job. He said, stick with that guy. You stick with him wherever he goes. Well, we said, well, you better stop at the front door after this, yeah. So the weapons did not go into Parliament building after that episode with John Diefenbaker.
How long did that last, the FLQ?
Shortly after Christmas. I recall getting served Christmas dinner in Ottawa by the Minister of National Defence. A big guy called MacDonald, I think his name was, at that time. He was helping serve us soldiers our dinner, Christmas dinner. And by this time we're in and out of the bush, and we're living in Dowles Lake Armories, I think. Dowles Lake, was it an armory? Yeah. And pretty comfortable there. So it folded right after that. Right after Christmas in 1970, I think we did not have to go back there. Another sad story. Coming back from an event in, not our regiment, but a member of the artillery, had his stun gun loaded, jumped out of the back of the truck and hit the ground. Of course, the gun loaded and fired. Well, we had stupid things like that happening in weapons accidents. Should never have happened. And we lost one there because he was returning from the Ottawa trip for leave or whatever it was, and killed himself jumping out of the truck. Yep.
You always have to be careful carrying a loaded weapon.
Yeah, there was another aside I mentioned earlier, Robert, too. That
something to do with bears.
There was a bear mauling. There hadn't been a bear mauling in Algonquin Park for 100 years until this May of 1978 when 3 young teenagers went into the Algonquin Park was very close, that is the north end of it, very close to Base Petawawa, where we were stationed. And these boys from the base went into the park to go fishing. And all of a sudden we got a call. The boys didn't turn up. Well, we went out to beat the bush. I think it took us about 6-7 hours before we really found. I don't think we found the boys first. We found the bear. The bear was guarding the 3 boys that he had killed. The bear had killed 3 teenagers. And the bear was sort of guarding them. That's the first thing we saw was the bear. So we bailed out of there in a hurry and got the guy with the rifle, the OPP, or the policeman, or Ontario Provincial Police, were on the ground by this time. And they went in with their rifle and got the bear. So then after they got the bear, we could go in and recover the remains of the boys. But again, I was involved in being the regimental sergeant major. I had to lead the bearer party into the bush too.
Not just something you remember, things like that.
Excuse me.
Yeah. Okay, we're getting back to the Armor School when you became RSM. What does the RSM of the Armor School do?
Other than being, what's the word we used there? Everything was sort of programmed in that you had to be requested. That is, you put your request for an instructor or something into a central shop, and the central shop then charged you with being at a certain spot at a certain time to instruct a certain subject to a certain group of people. Well, that's how we sort of sat back and waited to be offered a job, I suppose. No, I did walk around. I did on my spare time. I walked each of the squadrons: the gunnery squadron, the maintenance squadron, the communication squadron, and just to visit and check the people, and see what's happening. And of course, always when you're walking around like that, you're looking for dress and haircuts and things that the RSM's supposed to do. And again, as I mentioned earlier, I enjoy the part of being involved in instructing, the various things that could be requested to instruct in. Yes.
Okay, RSM of the Armored School, you worked there, and then you became, you got another RSM's job.
Okay, back to the HCH. Now then, yes. Again, I was mentioning earlier about the attitude of the HCH was hadn't changed a whole bunch. Maybe it. So again, we had to go back. By this time, of course, we had changed a lot of people. Squadron commanders had history with the Strathconas. My commanding officer, Bob Billings, was a Strathcona initially as a young officer. Jimmy Ellard was a squadron commander. He was initially a young officer of the Strathconas. So we had a change of attitudes, I think, in the HCH, and things were somewhat different. Mind you, there were some of the hanger-ons. Commanding officer Bob Billings said, this warrant officer, that warrant officer, and that warrant, they're going to go to the gunnery school, and they're going to become gunnery instructors. These were old hands at the regiment. Hockey players, whatever they were noted for, weren't very good soldiers, according to the commanding officer's view, and we all agreed. He sent them off to the armored school to become gunnery instructors. They came home. They were RTU'd, returned to unit as unfit for
Being a
further.
gunnery.
Well, they wouldn't pay attention. They wouldn't sit and listen to the thing. And they didn't want to be there. Is what happened. So they were RTU. So if you got warrant officers in a regiment, with that sort of attitude, I don't want to be here, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that, things are pretty tough. So that was another thing that happened, and you don't like to see soldiers go down the road that way. However, it did happen. But things did change after that. The regiment did get somewhat better for a short while. I would like to think it was better because I was there. But then, 2-year period of time, I'm an egotistical guy. I could say that. Yeah. But the 2-year period of time was up, and by golly, they sent me back to the armor school to do all the things I did before. Things hadn't changed much there. We did the same things as we did before. And after 2 years there, then my time was up and came west. Yep.
Now, before you actually came out to Suffield and went back to Gagetown, you'd actually been deployed to Cyprus again. You've already spent time in Israel. Now you moved to Cyprus.
With the HCH, with the regiment. We missed that part, didn't I? I'm sorry about that. That's the regimental sergeant major of the HCH. We did a 6-month tour in Cyprus. And we were talking earlier about peacekeeping, and there was absolutely no peace to keep. There was no war. There was no peace to keep even. Nothing was happening. For 26 years, 28 years,
Yes.
Robert, we kept that that Cyprus thing on.
the Green Line.
Oh, yeah. What a cakewalk. Yeah, that was a pretty easy tour, that one, for sure. I was able to have my wife come over, and we did a week tour of the island with a United Nations car. And I suppose it was a privilege of my position, I don't know. But it was one of those jobs that we probably had the best time of our life. Yeah, pretty easy.
Well, while you were in Cyprus, keeping the Greek Cypriot separate from the Turkish, or the Turkish Greeks, what was a typical day look like for a peacekeeper in Cyprus then?
On the Green Line, and when Robert mentioned the Green Line, they were pretty close together. It's like a narrow alley apart. They would throw stones at each other. These Greek Turk Cypriots and Greek Cypriots were facing each other across an alley. They'd throw stones at each other. They'd swear at each other. They'd moon each other. Just silliness like that. And there was nothing happening. Literally nothing happening. That would be the main event. Would be something like that on the Green Line through the city of Nicosia, and then out in the Ormafida or those other places, there was absolutely nothing happening. No, it was a very, very quiet time, and it went on for years and years. At least initially, there was some nastiness, as I understand it, but we certainly weren't involved in any of that. No.
Well, that was back in '74 when they so-called hit the fan.
Yes.
And,
early on, there was some
Yeah.
nastiness. Yeah. And I think there was a couple of soldiers from the Patricias that were lost early on.
So then after Cyprus, you come back to Canada, back to the armor school.
Initially we redeployed. We went back to the Petawawa, to base Petawawa. The regiment moved back. And then that summer, the summer we got back, '79, we went back to the school,
and so you had 2 shots at the RSM of the school.
Yep.
And did you make many changes compared to, I know there's always sort of a fight between the regiments and the school, especially when augmentee instructors and that, the requests for that. Did you make many changes or try to make many changes after being RSM of the HCH and then going back to the school again?
I don't think so. I don't think we could. Things were pretty well standard. Things were pretty well set in a routine or whatever you want to call it. And people come, and the course standards were set, reasonably set, There was some, as a matter of fact, I spent some time on training standards, I think on the NCO courses in particular, and rewriting or changing minor changes in the course training standards. Did I say standards? I don't change
Yep.
standards. I change course.
Curriculum?
Standards are set by the head shed, and
Yeah.
we make course. Okay, we build the courses from the standard.
Course packages, yeah.
And so we did some changes to the. Well, I wish the curriculums, I suppose, yeah, on the what is taught when, or what is taught when, and what portions are emphasized, and that sort of thing we do from training standards, yeah.
Now you spent 22 years out west, and then you've been out east all this time. And you're reaching the end of your career. What did you request from the career manager?
I suppose every time I saw the career manager, I said, "Get me west, get me west." One of the most disappointing things of my career would have been I would never become regimental sergeant major of the Strathcona. It's my first regiment. However, we did get to be regimental sergeant major of a regiment, which is at that time, I think there was only about 15 was the limit of chief warrant officers in the Armoured Corps.
Yeah.
So being one of 15 in the Armoured Corps was probably a feather in anybody's cap for sure. So it was still an honor to become a chief warrant officer and regimental sergeant major. And then eventually towards the end of my waning years, I suppose, of my career from the school, I said, "Well, how's my chances to get west?" He said, "We got the perfect job for you." In 1981, I got west finally, and we ended up in base Suffield as the base RSM. And that was a different experience. Now I'm in a green world. Robert, the green world is somewhat different than the brown world, I'll tell you. You know, we just had a whole bunch of people that didn't want to do this and didn't want to do that, and they all wore different caps and different badges, and that was I kept smiling to myself, you know, really. She's on the way out. I'm not going to rock the boat. Let her go. We did. We just sort of coasted off into the sunset.
But as base RSM of Suffield, you worked with some pretty good commanders, base commanders.
That was a bonus, probably, when General or Colonel Jack Dangerfield came on the same time as I did. But the disappointing part of that was because he's such a great man, and our service did fit. We did travel together, or move via various postings together, in various jobs in the same regiment or whatever. He only stayed 1 year. Of course, he was on the way up at that time.
Yeah.
He was a water walker, or whatever you want to call him. He was going.
Yeah.
He was a 4-bar at the time. A 4-bar, a full bull, you call
He
him.
ended up as a lieutenant general, did he?
I had to believe that.
Yeah.
In any case, following him came Colonel Lake. Colonel Lake and I had served together at the school. He was the commanding officer for a short while I was RSM at the school, and we respected each other. Okay. No, that's good enough. We'll leave that alone. And then after Jane Lake had left us, Murphy came on. Murphy and I got along really well. Good guy, yeah. Jim Murphy and I had served together in Europe. He was squadron commander when I mentioned the gunnery thing. He was our squadron commander over there then, so we got along well, yeah. So when retirement came, I guess, I don't know if you ever had the feeling when you got one of those big round clocks in front of you, it's got a second hand, go click, 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 click. You see the end of your career coming, right in front of my desk was one of those clocks. Click, click, click. The end is coming, boys. Yeah. Very interesting period of time, and luckily I had a good trooper that came with me.
So once you retired from the military out of Suffield, what did you do with your time after that?
Because I was relatively young and fit, age 55, I did get involved with the Legion to some extent. I became the branch initially, then I became a zone commander and then district commander, and I did become a vice president at the command level eventually. But you know, when you're up there, there's a whole bunch of politics involved, and I wasn't involved in politics, I guess. So I wasn't on side with the people there. I wasn't re-elected at the command council executive level. So we went off into the sunset from that job as well. I think probably too much, and I think I was told that somewhere along the line. If you're going to be talking to civilian people, Legion people, most of them at that time, well, they're all civilian people. You don't use military language. You don't talk to them as a regimental sergeant major. Maybe that's where I fell. That's where I fell. Yeah, I was too militaristic, too my way or the highway. Yeah. So I didn't survive the Legion thing very long because of the attitude I had of being the regimental sergeant major, I think, yeah. Probably that's what happened to my Legion career.
Going back to a happier time in your life, you mentioned earlier that you were posted for one summer to Camp Vernon.
Yes.
Now, the Camp Vernon is an Army cadet camp. What kind of instruction did you lead there with these cadets?
Oh, truck driver. I was, at that time, the kids used to drive trucks.
Yeah.
I think that driving course went by the boards, didn't it, Robert? In the
Yes,
thing,
I think, although I think they do some driver instructor with cars.
Okay.
But you used to have 2.5 tons.
Oh yes, it
the
was
old
the
gooseneck.
the international. No, it was a commercial
Okay.
international, whatever it
Yeah.
was. Yeah. Yeah. So that's what I did that summer, was teach the kids how to drive trucks. Yeah.
And I mean, at that time, Vernon was a big camp. They had upwards of, 1,000 cadets?
Oh, there was.
It's a huge summer camp.
Oh yes. Oh yeah. We had 2 sessions. There was the morning session and an afternoon session. Yeah. A different group in the morning than in the afternoon. We were busy, yeah. But again, a great experience for the family because they could camp out by the lake and had a lot of fun doing that one. Yeah.
Yeah, in the late 60s, I was the transport NCO out at Vernon.
Well,
So that was a good go.
Yes.
yeah, that was the summer of '62. After we come back from Egypt, they gave me that job for that summer.
Okay, is there anything else you would like to share with us, Bill? Is there any particular memories? How did the military shape your life? That's a sort of a question.
I think when you look around at our general population today, there's not a whole bunch of discipline. And I think I became a disciplined citizen, and to this day, I can't understand why people can't do this and can't do that. It's pretty routine to me for a lot of things that go on that shouldn't go on. We're talking about the radar thing. Well, if you don't like radar, don't speed. So, pretty basic stuff. And I can't seem to get through my head where people can't be lawful, can't do the legal things. Yes, do legal things. Why can't you leave the handicap parking spot for handicapped people. Pretty basic stuff.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people out there that don't seem to care. They don't imagine or haven't been disciplined or just whatever's happening out there. I think that's probably, in a nutshell, discipline. I learned how to do as I was told and be a good citizen. And I think that's what the military does to a lot of people. And that's an opinion.
Yeah, the discipline in the military in the old, in the 50s and the 60s was quite a bit different than it is now.
Ooh.
Yeah. I remember that well, you probably remember too, the detention barracks at Park Farm up in Wainwright.
Yeah.
That was,
Blueberry Hill and Curry Barracks.
Yeah,
They were all there.
in fact, a lot of the regiments used to use that as their pre-juniors course. And there were a lot of sergeant majors, well, Bill Evans, you obviously knew him, and that ended up in detention barracks prior to going on their juniors course. Yeah.
No, I never hit the DB. Come close, but never, never quite. Not behind the bars for sure.
Well, Bill, I would like to say thank you very much for joining us. Is there anything else you would like to say to our audience?
I started off saying that I had a pretty good trooper come along with me. My wife, you know, a military wife is probably a long-suffering, just the greatest kind of soldier there is. To put up with some of the things that they had to put up with, the moves, the socializing, the things that we're involved with. And I think maybe a military wife is probably a very, very valuable person, a very, very prominent citizen, a good soldier, yes, no question.
The non-paid soldier.
Yes. And my wife was probably at the top of the line for sure. Yeah.
But one thing I notice is that military people tend to get along and be easy to talk, or you can sit down if you're in the military, you've got something in common. Or
I
have
believe
been in the
that there's no, that goes on. It's an automatic thing.
Yeah.
It seems to me that when we hooked Tom Thompson as an example, we didn't serve together by no sense of imagination, but we did serve. And because of that, we have a camaraderie. And it is a camaraderie that is second to none, the service. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have internet connections from people, whether they're widows of guys I served with or whatever. We still connect, after all the years. Yep.
Bill, thank you for sharing your stories with us. And Ian, I didn't introduce you
That's okay.
At the beginning, and
I think we've done enough of these. We know who I am.
Yes. And Bill, thank you for sharing your story with us today. And ladies and gentlemen, this was another edition of A Century of Service, Stories of Alberta's Military History. Thank you very much.